because it's cheaper, and a lot of the time if you hit spell damage, it can do just as much as combustion would. We'll see though, because it's the first time I'm seeing this kind of different iteration on what has already been a very streamlined list.
And here we have it, Surrender in his customary T1 jersey. che0nsu looking pretty smart himself though, I like that shirt a lot. But in terms of the hands that the players are looking for, rather than their appearance, which maybe I should be commenting on, Surrender has got himself the Encounters flow right out the gate, which is a very, very nice start, obviously, to any matchup. But I know that you have said a few times that you've found yourself in a situation where you lose as the mage who plays Encounters flow. And it feels to me that while it's obviously important, it feels like it's a matchup where it's not the absolute nail in the coffin already that che0nsu hasn't hit it and Surrender has.
Well, it's not, definitely. And that situation doesn't happen often. Of course, it's very, very rare where you play encounters and still lose. But when it does happen, it's usually off the back of lacking the card draw to follow it up. Because the flow is only as good as how many cards you actually get to play that were discounted. That's an exact line from Over. And so if you're not able to draw that much, then it feels like you just spent 2 mana, where your opponent spent their 2 mana dealing 2 to your face, like with the Rune Orb, which is very, very crucial in the matchup. Damage is end all be all, but we do know that Surrender is able to go for a Pexus Blast early, so it's already the flow paying dividends. And we're also already seeing the Springwater nerf come in pretty clutch here. I mean, it's just 3 extra mana that che0nsu will have to spend across the course of all of these Springwaters, but we're seeing the somewhat upside of the refreshing Springwater going to 5 mana, which is that it immediately corrupts Ring Toss now.
A strict buff, similarly to first day at school as well. It's they've just made all these cards better. There are actually only 3 nerfs and what was it, 12 buffs instead.
This is a tough situation for Surrender too, because he does want the font to go off. So if it's Counterspell, there's nothing that he really wants to test with, because he gets punished if it's not Counterspell, right? Because if you test with Brain Freeze, you end up with a frozen minion. He definitely wants the font to go off, because otherwise the rest of his turn is looking like a lot of mana wasted or a very inefficient Ring Toss. So if he tests, it's potentially even with Shooting Star here, or you just say, my opponent's not likely to take Counterspell in this position anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's probably correct. It's just so horrible because there's so many good 5 drops as Mage. You have Ethereal Arcanist, Raz. Okay, interesting. That's pretty good.
Warrior and Ivory as well.
Yes, yeah.
There are, like, the vast majority, like 3 cost or less, and you can hit the absolute nuts 4-drop. Wormweaver is one of the few cards from Font of Power that can create a relevant board presence that isn't just immediately answered by a single devolving or a single combustion. And we're seeing for che0nsu here, he has picked up the flow, but it is on the most awkward possible turn where he also just wants to remove stuff. He could go flow, Ruined Orb, and Brain Freeze, but he's leaving 7 damage on board. That's not nice.
Yeah, I mean, well, no matter what you do, you are losing this game at the moment, right? So do you just take the risk of going for the, like you said, the flow flow, Ruined Orb, and Brain Freeze, and then just accept that a lot of attack is going to be left on the board? I don't know.
I don't think he could get away with that. If he takes 7 there, he's just dead to like Mask and a few pings or like fireballs. It's really tough to parse. che0nsu is going for a 2-turn board clear plan and misses on 1 Mana Worm, but still removes a decent amount of damage from the board, just potential damage by 1 Mana Worm being cleared.
Yeah, the problem is he still takes 7, if not more, on this turn now, that because the Mana Worm was left alive. And, you know, it was far from guaranteed that you would be able to clear off both the Mana Worms there. Not to say that it was wrong at all from che0nsu, but you need some kind of a miracle, no matter what, to pull yourself back in this one.
For Surrender, there's an option to go 4-drop plus 2-drop here just for maximum mana utilization, but if he wants to corrupt his Ring Toss, he can go Keyword and Ivory, and potentially even Brain Freeze as 1/1 after it attacks in order to get the Mana Worm more attack, but we'll see what comes off the Keyword and Ivory first. I don't begrudge just cards on the right-hand side, though.
Yeah, kind of a tough one. Ooh, can't be played now, right? Because nothing's damaged.
True. but he can at any point ping a minion and get the shield activation, which is just burst in the matchup. That's pretty good.
Yeah, very, very true. I think this makes a snap decision at the end for Soulshare that is like, you know, not a bad card at all. It's only going to serve him so poorly. Double Incantus Flow. I mean, honestly, now I think we're at the point where if you go for that plus Brain Freeze, obviously you could just throw it down if you want because you are going to lose this game. But it was the one maybe fringe potential nonsense out. I'm going to throw down a lot of words. But in the end, it matters not because Surrender got himself the flow, the 4-mana Apexis Blast. There's nothing that beats that.
And I think it's fair to say that this is an extreme example of how the refreshing Spring Water nerf has affected this matchup in particular. Like, che0nsu had 3 of them in his hand, and that's 3 total mana that he would have had more to work with prior to the patch. It's worth noting, though, that if che0nsu had encountered slow earlier, I'm pretty sure he still would have been in a decent spot, but we also just cannot understate the power of Font of Power. So I hate the redundancy of what in the matchup. Board presence is still very, very relevant. Flame Strike does not come online for a very long time, and specifically Wormweaver creates several threats that a single removal spell is not enough to deal with.
Indeed. che0nsu going to be switching over to, again, what looks like the most standard list of Miracle Rogue that we're seeing from the vast majority of players now. I think Vanessa Van Cleef is like the norm that you deviate from at this point, rather than a cool tech inclusion that it was a couple weeks ago. Especially as Double Foxy Fraud, again, just becoming pretty much core in the list. And against the likes of the Spell Mage that Surrender is, of course, going to be able to pilot again. I will say that I think the nerf to Spring Water is, again, very relevant in this matchup, just because it's not just the mana that you're deleting, it's the fact that if you can't play it on turn 4, maybe that's just a removal spell you don't have to be able to clear off these early boards. And so going wide at the start, getting these Cult Neophytes, and then finishing off with burn damage, it becomes slightly more playable as a win condition in what is considered, I think, often a very close matchup between these two decks.
Yeah, that's right. I would say that the nerf to Spring Water is also kind of like an indirect nerf to Apexis Blast as well, because Spring Water was traditionally so powerful in Spell Mage because it gives you chances to draw Apexis Blast and then immediately play it after if you had played Flow or you had saved the coin. That's not necessarily true anymore because you are only able to gain back 4 of the 5 mana you spend on the Spring Water turn, and Apexis is very key in the matchup, but I will say that a hand like this still probably gets the job done.
So are we going Coin Incantus Flow with this hand? You've just picked up Card Draw as well.
Yep. I think this is absolutely fine that he can then just coin Cram Session and then go for Font of Power on turn 3. Getting the flow down as soon as possible also plays around Cult Neophyte, just played on 2 for Rogue, which is a very valid play if you expect them to go for Encanter's Flow.
This is a bit of a tough spot, right? Because there are a fair few decent 3-drops with Rhyme Tongue, Flame Ward, Imprisoned Observer as well, which definitely make you want to go for Font of Power here. But Cram Session, you know, if you hit Brain Freeze, it's nice just to clear things off. It's just more efficient use of your mana as well, because there's very, very few 1-cost spells that you would want to play off the font.
Honestly, I think there's even potential for Shooting Star Ping here.
Okay.
Font of Power is very likely to give 2 drops, so I think even if he plays it next turn, he'll likely have something to do with the rest of his mana. Surrender is just going to go for the card draw and says that if I get Primordial Studies / Spell Power minion from the Font of Power, the Shooting Star gets even better anyway, so I think that's fine as well.
Field Contact and then step it? I think if you don't go for that, you're kind of a little too tight on mana for the next couple turns. Yeah,
that's possible. There's also like the Foxy, although that's just kind of worse, right? Because you don't end up with a minion on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a play that you want to be forced to make, but a play that if you're presented with it, you need to be lunging at it when it's powerful.
0-cost font allows Surrender to play 3 drops, which he did get quite a few of here. So Observer, obviously, against the majority of Rogue minions, deals with it pretty nicely and makes them discouraged from going wide onto the board, but it does have this one downside of you can give them an Octobot proc that they're free to time whenever they get it.
I will take that downside if it means that it just deletes their board. Like, obviously, you're expecting them to go in with the field contact this turn, but again, the fact that you're not putting anything that they can actually interact with on your side of the board means Brain Freeze, Prize Plunderer, Orc Merchant a lot of the time just becomes so much less reliable.
And the save of the Shooting Star is definitely going to be clutch for Surrender here.
Yeah, very much so.
No spell damage to go alongside it makes things a little bit awkward, so he could think about devolving missiles, but there's a chance it goes super wrong, right? If you don't hit the field contact, then it's not necessarily even dying this turn.
What to do? What to do?
However, if he does just go Shooting Star Ping, he's taking minimum 8 more damage next turn. Nice positioning from che0nsu as well.
Yeah. And that's very scary. This is how you lose the matchup, because if they just start throwing, throwing down the Wicked Stabs to your face, then finish you off with Alexstrasza, it's not likely that they have all of those cards, but that is how you lose. Otherwise, you're just almost guaranteed a win here for Surrender.
Right. Oh, sorry, yeah, this just leaves 6 damage on board instead of 8. Pretty obvious. I don't know why I didn't see that. Apologies. che0nsu now has very little in terms of refill potential, but he can at least build one minion that survives the Observer leading up into the Jandice turn. You can see how all in he is on just trying to stick any amount of damage onto the board because he's gotten this aggressive start and has the Alex in hand. You're absolutely right about the Wicked Stabs. I've been in many positions as Mage where they just send 2 stabs to your face and you already know you're dead next turn. There's just no way to play around Alexstrasza coming down for 8 damage.
Yeah, and now I definitely like the look of Apexis Blast. Well, I mean, I was going to say, I guess you could go Ping plus Arcane Observer because you do need to be... Oh, sorry, Arcane Luminary. Because you do need to be cognizant of the fact that sending Burn into minions is still not ideal. You do want to set up a quicker lethal with Apexis Face. But the average stats just kind of feel worth it to get more survivability.
Yeah, I agree. This doesn't feel like a game where Surrender is able to race che0nsu in terms of just sending Burn to the face because he doesn't have like Fireball or Mask in hand to kind of aid that game plan. So I'm all in favor of being able to get maximum board presence and try and win off of that leading into his Springwater turn.
Time runs out on me.
It also just corrupts his ring tosses right away, which is pretty relevant as well.
Yeah, that is a big deal. It does chew up a pretty premium piece of removal, but I think on average you're probably just getting enough of a board presence to where it doesn't matter all too much. Jan is going to need to be pretty huge here to have any kind of a chance of pulling things back. And Greybow, okay, it's good. It's a good outcome.
Absolutely. Surrender does have the devolving missiles to mitigate any disasters if he guesses wrong on the illusion, for example. But Greybow is quite annoying indeed.
Obviously, Mage has many ways to deal with this very, very quickly, with devolving missiles looking pretty key here.
Yeah, can start with the Springwater and he'll still have 5 mana to work with, which means either devolving plus Apexis. You can also start with the Primordial Studies. I guess it doesn't really change anything in terms of breakpoints. Oh, wait, it does if he goes Apexis on the Greybow.
Yeah, the question is really just which minion have you made the illusion one? Because generally Greybow is the one that you pick, right? Because you want it to die as soon as possible to get the Death Rattle replayed.
Yeah, it's really tough because there could have been a mind game here.
Yeah.
And it looks like Surrender is just going to go for devolving instead. And because he couldn't really check the mind game without pinging. Whoa!
Whoa!
That's insane! The stats on those and the fact that the 5/6 can attack, right? Because che0nsu's rogue.
That's the best 3-drop and the best 4-drop. That is absolutely absurd. And it's also a lot of damage. The Alexstrasza win condition is actually just online if he can deal with this taunt.
Yeah. Honestly, for Surrender there, I was looking at him potentially like trying to hit a cheap spell damage, Apexis on the 4/6, and even if that was the illusion, you kind of just bite the bullet and then you go 4/5 into a minion, and then hope that the death rattle goes on Jandice, something like that. And if it didn't, then you go devolving the next turn. This is obviously the disaster scenario. che0nsu was trying to make it such that he didn't have to worry about Grey Vow at all. And now che0nsu has Brain Freeze, Prize Plunder, and can send another 9 damage to face and Wicked Stab in hand.
Oh yeah, Wicked Stab face, Brain Freeze the Cyclone. Perfect. You can get a kill off the taunt as well and send all of this face. Obviously, Alexstrasza is still 2 turns away, so he's far from guaranteed to being able to get there. But this is like the best possible turn that che0nsu could have hoped for.
Yeah, extremely powerful. Best mana utilization, he's ahead on board, and che0nsu's just kind of dying. He needs miracles off of, what, Flood Mage? I don't... Card draw? It's just not there.
Okay, good draw.
Obviously, he can set up ice barriers with these ring tosses, but there's more than 8 damage on board. If che0nsu gets the second Wicked Stab at any point with a spell to test for counterspell, that is just game. And Surrender needs to kill che0nsu before turn 9. It all just seems like too much to ask for.
Yeah, I don't really see it coming together.
It's like barrier, and then he freezes something, and then Apexis something else. I guess the Apexis has to go face to give che0nsu any chance of trying to race che0nsu.
Oh, but at the same time, if you're not killing the Foxy with the Brain Freeze and then fireballing one of the others, like I think for che0nsu the best game plan might just be to hope that Alexstrasza isn't there. I know there's only so many cards left in the deck that it can only be so many cards that aren't Alexstrasza, but I don't know. He's dying way too quickly.
Yeah, I think he has to go face with the Apexis. It's
okay.
It actually doesn't give him that many good break points because the 5/6 is just out of range of the Apexis being able to kill it. So che0nsu is going all in here and just saying, I'm not actually going to remove any minions this turn. I'm just taking away the maximum amount of damage while giving himself top decks for counter lethal. But che0nsu gets the Wicked Stab. che0nsu did take counterspell though.
He just played it right off the top without trying to test with Field Contact and Prize Plunder first. That did seem a little quick.
Yeah, that did seem hasty, right? Because if he got something like Swindle, he just wins on the spot off the top here.
Or Shadow Step, exactly. I mean, that was the card, right? And then he would have still had mana to play it as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna call this straight away a blunder from che0nsu because there's no reason to start with Wicked Stab there. He doesn't get punished by starting with Field Contact ever.
And now Surrender has an outright. Fireball is game.
Hexus Blast also with ping.
True.
Or he has to play both. I think he's played both. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Rune Orb can discover things. There's just outs.
There are outs.
gave himself this ability to kill che0nsu before the Alexstrasza turn.
That still works because Fireball will cost 3 mana.
Yes. che0nsu's thinking about can he get away with another ring toss here, but without the board clear to go alongside it and also not being in Alexstrasza range, it just doesn't work. Rune Orb cannot give Rune Orb.
Thalnos, 7/10 ping doesn't get there. There's no mana either.
It's so close, but it's just not there.
Is there anything that Rune Orb can give? If he gets freeze, it doesn't matter because he's just dead.
Well, his perspective now is to hope that Alexstrasza isn't there, which is probably meaning take Cone of Cold, freeze away the rest of the minions, and then try to top deck the other Fireball for next turn.
Agreed. Yeah, he sees it as well as the only out. Whew. A closer game, arguably, than it should have been here for che0nsu, as he is able to get the win from the Alexstrasza. But the question does really need to be asked for Surrender here. Again, we know that it was the worst possible outcome from devolving. He made his opponent's board better, if anything, with the options that he gave him. But was it still the correct play to go for that? Because even if these weren't the biggest minions, you know, 3 attack on a 3-drop is not absurd. Even if it didn't have 9 health to go alongside it, 5 and 8 attack overall on a 4-drop and a 3-drop is not unheard of. And he very possibly led himself to taking that extra damage and die to all the burst damage.
It was a very difficult turn to criticize because obviously Surrender went for the devolving in order to not have to care about where the Greybow Death Rattle goes. The play I was suggesting of the Apexis Blast with very likely a playable spell damage minion that turn, if the Death Rattle had gone onto the 4/4, then he would end up leaving it up that turn, right? Ideally, that was the outcome he wanted, so then he could just VT over the Jandice and then go for devolving the next turn. But then there are ways that che0nsu can possibly punish that if he gets even more minions on board, right? And then the devolving doesn't necessarily go into the Greybow and surrenders in the same position. It's really tough to say whether or not it was ideal, but the mistake we can criticize as an objective mistake from che0nsu was not testing with field contact first for the chance of proccing counterspell without Wicked Stab.
Yeah, 100%. There was very little else that could have gone wrong, because even if it is the Netherwind portal instead of counterspell, even if that gets a taunt, he still had the ability to push through that, right, and then still get lethal with the rest of the minions if something can go wrong like that. But either way, it does mean that Surrender is going to be switching over to his Miracle Rogue now. We've gone from a Rogue Mirror, Rogue Mage to a Rogue Mirror once again, and it looks like pretty much the standard list with the tech... Oh, sorry, I take that back. I was going to say with the tech inclusion of Broomstick. He's taken a few cards out here, going with the deleting the Foxy Fraud package, instead going for Yoink plus Broomsticks as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I just haven't seen Yoink run in a natural rogue list since, I think, what was it, week 1 or week 2 from Lambi series? Back in the old Watch Post rogue, which already feels like an artifact from the past. Yeah. What Surrender has cut to make room for that, I believe, is the Foxy Frauds. I'm going to go check this list again. He's also just not running Vanessa Van Cleef, which we've seen if you are running Broomstick, there is simply no room. Yeah, only one Ogre Merchant as well. And so, I am not necessarily sure if he wanted these techs for the mirror in particular, because I think animated Broomstick is very good in the mirror. I don't know about the average quality of Yoink though, but I'd say the Mage hero power is really great because not only can you clear your opponent's minions, you can proc your own Octobot.
Absolutely blistering start here, though, for che0nsu. Even though Jandice is not often a card you keep, with Octobot, I mean, it's just a curve, right? 3-4, coin 5 if your efficient Octobots gets activated. The only card I'm considering throwing is the Vanessa.
Yeah, well, you can take over from Mullet over for here, Dark. Completely agrees, and I do as well. Looks like a very, very strong opener. Efficient Octobot, so hard to deal with in the mirror when coined out this early.
Wow. I mean, I wasn't saying that it would be a coin Octobot with this play, just because it does interrupt coin Jandice, right? I mean, that was definitely my game plan here.
Thinking about it again, this does represent a situation where Surrender's not free to go for his own Octobot, which is his ideal play on this turn, because che0nsu would then immediately be able to proc his and get the first benefit because he could play Mankrik immediately. This does potentially disrupt the coin Jandice, but I think it might be worth it overall to give him like the chance to disrupt Surrender's own ideal plays. And if Surrender does nothing on turn 2, then he's able to just dagger into Mankrik anyway.
That's fair. That is fair. I think for Surrender here, I'm honestly leaning towards still going for the Octobot, because the turn after, you can just deal with essentially anything that che0nsu throws down. Obviously, you're very low on value at that point, without the field contact in hand. But again, he's just going for slowing down che0nsu's game plan. This
play from Surrender, I think, gives him a small chance to be able to one-shot the Octobot. If he had gotten a one-cost card to go along with this turn, he could go Octobot, Ogre Merchant into Brain Freeze his own guy, and then Prize Plunderer to deny the discount. I'm not sure if it's worth it by this point, but if he's going to ignore it 2 turns in a row, then he can definitely do the thing next turn with a Cult Neophyte.
Yeah, and it's shaping together nicely here for che0nsu if he does get an activation on the Octobot, then he can, of course, go for a field contact turn. But if not, he can still just spend his mana on Neophyte and draw. But now for Surrender, again, you have to be looking at some kind of a proc here on the Octobot.
Right, his own. He can definitely get rid of the other one with the Prize Plunderer now. And the Brain Freeze has a good target, so obviously much better for Surrender to wait in that last situation. And while it is risky to leave up opposing Octobots for this long, there's often situations in Rogue where they play it that early and bluff that they have the activator on their own side. Surrender's patience has paid off in this iteration, and che0nsu is met with a very awkward board.
I mean, this is just great play from Surrender. Like, the line I was thinking of, while it did obviously have some upsides, I think that Surrender played to this... I mean, it wasn't even an out. He had all the cards in hand that he used on this turn already. He'd planned this out long in advance. And it means that he is now ahead on board, and che0nsu has to struggle to pull things back.
The one downside for Surrender is that he's used a lot of his field contact juice. If he gets that off the top, it is going to be far less powerful, but he says tempo is way more important. And now, the Broomstick probably just going to be used as a swindle activator. I think it's worth it so that he can consolidate the board lead that he paid so dearly for in the beginning.
100%. There's a lot of good minions that he can get here. Kazakus being one of them for next turn. Value sorted for the next few turns.
In terms of how this set of trades go, I guess the 2-1 into the 3-2, and I was honestly interested in Neophyte value trading over the 1-1, but I guess the Divine Shield on his Octobot isn't all that important anyway.
I mean, I'm wondering if you actually trade Broom in, because then there's no good targets for Dagger, whereas otherwise you're always leaving something good.
Good catch. Oy, so awkward for che0nsu. If he goes for Secret Passage, there's, like, of course, Kazakus a good outcome. Second Octobot wouldn't be awful in this position either. 3-7 on Crick's Wife?
Yeah, you're absolutely taking it now. If there was, like, Foxy Forward plus Swindle, you'd think about taking that instead, but absolutely here, you just go for the getting the 3-7 in play. It's a pretty big difference here at this point, though. It's much more achievable to actually kill it off for Surrender.
After your Encounters Flow montage, can we get a Surrender reaction montage, Darren? I very much look forward to it, because I did really enjoy his slight eyebrow raise and look 40 degrees to the left at the Mad Crick's Wife.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what option he went for here, actually, because there was some consideration to go for 1 to try and hit poison plus deal 3 damage to immediately kill the Mancrick. But if you did go for 5, honestly, I can see the argument for all of these on 5 mana. They all do something pretty good.
I'd have to imagine he went for 5 just because his hand is doing nothing the next couple turns until Alexstrasza. And so I kind of like the look of Rush to deal partially with the Mancrick. The rest of this turn looks like it's going to be Yoink. And sometimes you get a hero power that, combined with the Rush over 2 turns, can deal with the 3-7.
Fair enough. Draw
Deal 3?
You're looking at that over draw 2?
It's really close, right? Because Surrender does have, like, Alexstrasza to just follow up the curve even if he doesn't necessarily draw. I'm just scared for his position losing board because this turn he is giving up the Mancrick and che0nsu has full initiative.
Looks like it went
Hunter hero power as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're going for stealth as well. Means that Hunter hero power starts to represent lethal very quickly. If he can go... Wow, okay. If he can go Golem plus Wicked Stab next turn and then into Alexstrasza, he's looking at lethal very possibly in the next 2 turns. However, that Rusted Raider has something to say about it.
And the Moonfang is threatening counter lethal as well. che0nsu has his own Alexstrasza and a Runed Orb in hand. Yikes. Okay, that's a very welcome draw for Surrender though.
There's still no reason to, like, I guess you can start with the Golem, right, and see what you draw, but I'm wondering if there's any reason to go for Wicked Stab still, just to use the mana now to try and hit lethal. Broom's interesting.
Oh, man. If he had... I mean, he can stab the Moonfang because... Okay, he can test first for the illusion with the Octobot into the 1-8. I think it's relatively likely that it's the Moonfang that's illusioned here because
Agreed.
the taunt is just so powerful for che0nsu's position. And if it's by some miracle the 1/8 that was illusioned, then Surrender can go for something more aggressive, like the Neophyte. Now I think he has to respect the Moonfang.
Oh, I hate that so much. But I think...
I hate it too, but he's kind of dying.
Yeah.
And he bite the bullet.
Yeah, I was still considering Broom, but I guess you can... the fact that the Rustied Raider sticks around for a turn is really not that big of a deal, because you can just deal with it with the stealth next turn. Shadow Step is a premium top deck, though, for che0nsu, if he was to try and set up 2-turn lethal.
What makes something real?
Jandice has been the bane of Surrender's existence these past couple games. Probably just on the Zai, yeah.
Yeah, don't get too fancy with this one.
If we're talking outs for Surrender, if he gets... I was going to say perfect Broom trades, but I'm not even sure what he can do with the mana he has at the moment.
Yeah, it's likely that he's just going to be dead. Like, if he gets the, like you said, perfect outcomes off of the Swindle to get, I don't even know, Mancrick again, a decent draw. If he can go Mancrick into Mancrick Enraged, then maybe we're talking, right? That he can clear off enough whilst also setting up lethal with Alexstrasza.
Maybe. We can take a look at what's... Oh, sorry, we can't take a look at what's left for Surrender because he hasn't drawn all that much. But it does definitely feel like Mancrick is above average.
Okay.
Yeah? All right.
Okay. Whoa, plus prize plunder? This is salvageable. This is definitely salvageable now for Surrender.
Absolutely. So he can prize on the Zai. You're pretty sure that's the illusion. And then you can room and then step the prize and play it again?
So many options.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm wondering if you end up getting the Broom on the Zai instead. But I guess that can go on the Jandice or the 1/7 or whatever anyway.
Okay. Alright, looks like Surrender is just going to go for the full clear on the 6/4. This is really smart, right? Because now the Broom can deal with the Zai without having to waste any damage from the prize manager. Super nicely done.
Very, very nicely done. And a huge swing for Surrender now. He's representing lethal on the next turn. che0nsu has...
A fireball out.
Well, it's rogue spells, right? It's not even mage spells.
Oh, right, you're right.
So, Wicked Stab, obviously, it's not quite there.
Sinister Strike into Passage for another stab? I don't know.
Yeah, we're getting there.
He's just not dealing with this board, is he?
Prep? That's a mana.
Passage, okay. I mean, he can survive on board. From his perspective, maybe he just plays as though Alex is not there for Surrender. Oh, Surrender's so stressed, but he's in a good position.
It kind of feel like going for Wicked Stab was a... I guess it wouldn't have got there. It would have to be double Wicked Stab. Yeah, fair enough.
One off? One off.
Oh my goodness.
Clear minions. But clearing minions is pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah. He's looking at going for the Orc Merchant because he gets to keep the stab next turn, so he wants to do that for lethal setups. Okay,
right.
Sure.
I like that.
Yeah.
Strong. And now Surrender is 3 off. Yeah, even with the hero power.
11, 15, yeah. Yeah, I'm only making 13 with this. One Thief, I guess you probably have to go for instead then. I mean, obviously you could just go Alexstrasza on yourself to get an 8/8 in play if you're afraid of dying on the other side as well.
So
You're right. That's... Oh, it's super close. And then, if Surrender's afraid of exactly Alexstrasza, if he goes Alex's own face, then just Alex on his Alex puts him in a bad situation. Right?
True.
And so, I think this might be look for one thief delay options. The Cult Neophyte also sort of helps in that regard. And then try to get the Alex lethal next turn. Cone of Cold!
Cone of Cold
That's
is the nuts! That's the absolute nuts.
Oh, and he gets to fit in the Redagger. He is setting up for the counter lethal Derek. This is so back and forth.
Oh my god. And so, Wicked Stab you could set up for this turn. Honestly, you may just have to go Alex Straza on himself, right? Just to survive.
And then if Surrender Alex is his Alex, then pretty bad spot again, I suppose. So che0nsu's going for a bit more greed, I suppose, something like Taunt and Copy. Does that ever help him?
Oh, he went for 1 mana. Wow.
Okay. So he's looking to freeze and then step this, perhaps?
Yeah, so if he goes... Yeah, he can't go Wicked Stab plus Dagger to be able to guarantee the freeze on the Kazakus. On the Mankrik, sorry.
Cult Neophyte's actually so clutch here.
Yeah, it really is.
But it's actually the one thief that is making this still lethal for Surrender, even if
Oh my god.
gets frozen.
So he can still step it though, right? And then play it again, which he has to do.
Yes, he can. And he has to... I mean, this is not guaranteed to hit the non-frozen minion, right? It could still miss.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I don't actually know if it guarantees to hit a non-frozen minion.
I don't know either. And now Surrender is still 1 off. This is the closest Rogue Mirror ever.
It gets Mage spells, so there's no immediate outs for lethal on 1 mana.
There's not. And so...
Flurry is what you're looking for as the out, and you point at your opponent's face and then set up lethal next turn.
If he Alex's his own face, he's still kind of okay on board because the Mankrik is like a lot of health. I think both players have been very aware of their own Alex Strazas up until this point. That's why we've seen these type of desperation plays from che0nsu to go for the freeze.
Studies is fairly likely to hit Steward of Scrolls, to be fair, which maybe is a better chance, but Combustion is just a decent card.
This depends on whether he thinks Combustion is actually going to achieve that much next turn, because we could see che0nsu trading into the Alex Straza. In terms of overall value, che0nsu is winning, but in terms of current board, Surrender is winning.
And so if che0nsu has to go Alex on Alex, as it's looking like here, to kill off the opposing Alex Straza because there is not lethal yet, then I guess he's still kind of afraid of burst damage, like a Mage card was just discovered there. If that's Fireball into Wicked Stab, there's potential here, but there's nothing he can do to play around that. So I guess the question is just, after you've gone for the kill of the Alex, do you trade or do you go face?
Really close. You kind of expect the Alex to stick by that point.
Yeah.
So if we're talking breakpoints here, Wicked Stab is denied if he trades both of the 1/2s. Just Stab, right? Oh wait, then there's
no,
Dagger
right?
as
Because
well.
it's 6. Yeah.
Oh. But you can deny Shadow Step / Tenwu outs if you remove the 1/thieves. There's so many things to consider, and che0nsu says it is not worth it. I'm gonna play like the burst isn't there. There's the Shadow Step. Surrender has a chance at Fireball, at Rune Orb into something, at Apexis Blast, at Mask of Cthulhu.
They're out.
Here we go.
And it all comes down to this. Even card draw could be enough. There's a lot of good cards here. Even Flame Strike maybe is enough just to clear the board and try and win that way. Like, there's so many things you can look for.
Surrender still has stabs in the... No, 1 stab in the... Oh, no! Not like this!
Absolute garbage. Only one of these is a real card.
The one on the right. And he can isolate the Alex? And into a 6-drop, which is still pretty powerful, but it's the best he's got, right?
Yeah. Oh,
so
stings.
Yeah, it's like Whether you trade into Kazakus, then Combustion, or Combustion and then trade into the 3-1 Mankrik. He definitely needs to send the 3-7 face, I guess, to give himself Wicked Stab outs off the top. Oh, this 6-drop! What's it gonna be?
He can... Oh, yeah, okay.
Claw Machine, that's so much attack!
That's so much.
Okay, Surrender trades it. That's why he didn't go face with the Mankrik first.
Yeah, the fact that it dies is so big there for Surrender.
Yeah.
But he's just so far behind on value. This has to be over now, right? Like,
I mean,
this is
he has
always
Secret Passage
lethal.
outs. Because there's still a Yoink in the deck and I think 1 stab.
Give me that. Look what I...
I mean, Surrender is completely dead based on value. That's obvious to see. But he has Secret Passage, so it's not completely over. Texas Blast for che0nsu means that even if somehow this board gets cleared, or most of it, like he still has burst damage for next turn.
Yeah, you just got to end on Neophyte here, and I think you are happy.
Almost out of cards.
Wait, unless
actually
there's
fatigues if he plays one
fatigue
more.
that you're afraid of? Okay, fair enough. So you just end with the dagger.
Because 8 damage, if you go Wicked Stab and just dagger, then he loses to fatigue. But the field contact is not it for Surrender. Oh, that was the closest Rogue Mirror I've ever seen. Right up there with Gabby versus Viper.
Yeah, right down to the wire, all the way through. You have to consider the tiniest of breakpoints. Like in the Alexstrasza tennis, I agree that it was probably correct for Surrender to put it on himself rather than to go for the line of going the offensive Alexstrasza. Again, using the Wicked Stab on the Moonfang, probably correct as well, because he's just losing the race at that point. But in your head as Surrender, you have to be running back over every possible different iteration you could have gone for. Maybe there was a slim chance to get it, but it wasn't there in the end, and che0nsu was too rough.
And this turn in particular from Surrender, this was so well done when he hit that clutch prize plunder to be able to clear the second Jandice. Was it even the third Jandice? I don't know. There was just so much more stats that che0nsu got to play throughout the majority of that game. The Apexis Blast going face, we had a back and forth conversation about that. It kind of gave Surrender the window to be able to threaten Alexstrasza lethal, but it also kind of signaled to che0nsu that Surrender was holding that Alexstrasza, and it made it such that che0nsu was going for things as niche as the 1 mana golem off of Kazakus to be able to hit a way to stay alive for that one exact turn. That was so well played on both sides, and I hope they can keep it up because we're only midway through this series, Dara.
Yeah, exactly. There's still plenty more to come, I would imagine, because now the Rush Warrior for Surrender, which is a little bit interesting that we're seeing it now. I would honestly expect Rush Warrior to come down with higher priority as a counter to Rogue than the Rogue Mirror. But Surrender now, after having lost the Rogue Mirror, is going to be going with the Rush Warrior, which again, as we've seen already today from Lambie series, does feel like a very good matchup against the Rogue.
Yeah, that's right. Rush Warrior, especially this version from Surrender with the double Ogre Mancers. This is a deck where, I mean, I always say Ogre Mancer is only good if you're already ahead on board, but Rush Warrior tends to be ahead on board by that point in the matchup. And then if they can follow with Ogre Mancer, it removes the outs of Rogue of being able to go for a big field contact swing because they just get immediately punished by all the 2/2s that spawn.
Looking like a pretty good hand for Surrender. I mean, honestly, I would consider holding on to a lot of these cards. I'm not sure how good Crab Rider is in the early game anymore. The main reason I'd be looking to hold on to that is just to corrupt the stage dive in a timely manner.
That is true. Crab Rider also, because of the nerf, is like far less of a priority removal. There are certain matchups where you just jam this immediately, and if you can follow with Rakara, then the Rogue can just roll over and die. But it's really difficult. Even just the 2 5-drops back-to-back feel like they have some good curve potential.
The tough mulligan. A very, very tough mulligan, because you're always thinking here, am I like overcomplicating things? Am I only keeping these cards because I see them in my hand? And in the end, Surrender just keeping the stage dive. This is also a line that I can very much respect, because the cards he had, they weren't the nuts, right? They weren't the game-winning cards. Whereas here, corrupting the stage dive, drawing another rush, comboing it with Rakara. There are some very strong plays that start to become possible now.
Indeed. And the curve looks relatively simple for Surrender. Just Crab Rider into even just ETC on tempo is fine in the matchup. The only consideration is what does Octobot do to his board state, right? Because you saw che0nsu play out the Guardian Og Merchant, almost baiting Surrender into playing a minion in order to be able to proc a potential Octobot. But maybe we're getting a little bit too deep down the rabbit hole. If there is Octobot, then che0nsu probably holds the Guardian Og Merchant altogether. Surrender is going to start with ETC instead of Crab Rider because he can potentially get immediate damage off of the Crab Rider next turn. Interesting.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think that the threat of leaving up a 2-1 Orc Merchant here is really not something that you're afraid of at all. It's not like a high priority Shadow Step target or anything like that, so you can just curve out with the Crab Rider next turn instead.
che0nsu notes that though and decides to pre-damage the ETC. And so the Crab Rider isn't actually able to get immediate ETC value. I still think it's the play though, just to have it on board if anything, and it can be comboed at least with one attack with Rakara, not quite so punishing back to its Wind Fury days, but I think it's still worth it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just getting more stats on the board. It sucks that you're playing a vanilla 2-mana 1/4 effectively here, but you are definitely still going to take it. Man.
Not the greatest hand from che0nsu, but it's probably fine to just wait and then play Kazakus next turn.
Oh yeah. I mean, this hand gets a lot better. This has a lot of mid-game punch. So you're just biding your time for the moment. It of course means that Surrender does get priority on this Rakara. And you have to imagine, you know, if your opponent is just passing here, passing again, not really doing anything, the likelihood of them playing Kazakus is fairly high, in all honesty. So just slamming down Rakara next turn feels pretty good.
And che0nsu is actually going to commit 2 pieces of removal here as well to get rid of the Crab Rider, which doesn't have Wind Fury. It feels like a lot, but you know, I think it's very smart. che0nsu's mana is spoken for until turn 6, so he just wants to make sure that there is as little possibility for Surrender to punish him with minions stuck on board as che0nsu goes for his slow turn of Kazakus.
Kind of a lot going on here. Yeah. I mean, it's big, of course, but for Surrender here, there's a lot going on beneath the surface. Because if you go for just Playmaker here, then you obviously set up for a potential Rakara next turn, but that doesn't trade especially well against the likes of Kazakus, because then you're just playing a 4-3 into a 3-3. But Stage Dive on the next turn, like, you're far from guaranteed to be able to play whatever you get off of that if you go for Playmaker this turn instead. So there's a lot going on, I think.
Yeah, I think it's very smart for Surrender to go for Playmaker as well. You saw che0nsu commit so much removal that he's not likely to have more to deal with it, and very likely instead hoping to set up Kazakus. So Surrender is making it such that it's as painful as possible for che0nsu to take this slow turn. And even though it's not necessarily Rakara this turn, Stage Dive into just like bumper car is a lot of value with the Playmaker. Alternatively though, Sword Eater lets him deal with the Kazakus and partially protect the 4-3. I say partially because there's a lot of golem outcomes that still kill it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on because there's 5 rush minions left in the deck, I believe. 2 bumper cars, 1 Crab Rider, Samuro, and Runthag. And 3 of them, and obviously the Crab Riders and the bumper cars are pretty insane. But if you miss on that and just have to go Rakara, it feels pretty rough.
What now?
But it's also not the end of the world because then the Playmaker can just go face and become a 6-5.
Sure, yeah, and then double trade, fair, yeah.
Potentially even leave up the Kazakus because che0nsu will have to trade the Rakaras for him. Not sure. It's a lot. Like, if the Stage Dive gets Samuro, then that's a lot of incentive for not trading, right? Because che0nsu will go wide and then your Samuro can sweep up. It's so many different options, and Surrender is going to end up on the Sword Eater instead. very likely the safest play among all of them, and still reasonable because he can follow up with Ogremancer and still be in a decent position.
Pretty
Not against
insane.
that, though.
Yeah, that's clearing off absolutely everything that you can play. And it's disgusting here. Surrender has to go for Rakara trade, obviously depending on what you get, if you can throw in Bumper Car instead. But Samuro, you don't want to throw that in either.
Oh, this is so interesting though, because Surrender can set up conditioning, and if che0nsu plays any other minion, the Samuro can go into that and sweep up the 5/5 with its Frenzy. That's really powerful. However, if che0nsu plays nothing, then Surrender's kind of taken an additional 5 damage, which is, you know, not really the end of the world. I think he's relatively fine.
Yeah, I think if they play nothing and you get a turn closer to Troublemaker without dying, that sounds okay for Surrender. You can just hero power, right? So it's only like 3 damage a turn anyway.
che0nsu's got to smell something fishy if he sees just here, but
yeah.
I think it's fine. There's not much che0nsu can do to play around a giant Samuro.
I must choose.
The series already has had so many nuanced decisions. I'm loving it, Derek.
Indeed. Way more complicated than this matchup initially appeared to be, but Surrender is saying he's just going to go with the Rakara right now. This does mean that, obviously, no matter what che0nsu does, Surrender has more control over the game. He can just slam Ogremancer if there isn't a big play. And even if there is a Jandice play here, he can still go for conditioning plus Samuro if he has to clear.
Right. In the grand scheme of things, being less greedy has cost him a Rakara end hand and a weapon for the benefit of not taking an additional 5 damage that one turn. Taunt, though, is super annoying for Surrender because his Samuro takes more damage than it normally would have to. Still fine, though. I think he absolutely needs to clear this and give himself the best window for Ogremancer, which then leads up into his Troublemaker turn.
Yeah, it just sets up for very, very strong plays, one after the other. Like, using Samuro this early is on effectively one card sucks against Rogue because you really want to save it for that big turn with field contact where they go super wide onto the board, play a whole bunch of minions. But hopefully the Troublemaker can take care of most of that anyway.
What now?
In a lot of worlds, you actually don't even need the buff on the Samuro to deal with the entire board because the illusion is very likely on the 4/4.
Okay.
I don't think it's worth just not conditioning though, because all you get to do with the rest of your mana is play the Gunarg, and then like the buff on the Samuro at least gives it more health so it can stay on board, and you've just spent the mana, so I think it's fine.
Wow!
Wow!
Damn.
I did not expect this. The Ogremancer's dead on board.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, what this does say to che0nsu is this card is not Samuro. If it was Samuro, I would have played it here. And che0nsu, I mean, if you want to call it bait or not, whatever it is, che0nsu's falling for it and going super wide on the board now.
This is so next level from Surrender. He is very likely taking a lot of damage in the process, but he's deleting a lot of che0nsu's best resources, which, if he had gone Samuro first, would have left che0nsu in favorable board position.
I mean, I'm sure Surrender was... oh, wow. Did put it that way. So if we had gone for the line of Samuro plus Gunarg, it would have left a lot of damage on board still as well.
Yeah. I think the two options there were just conditioning Samuro or what Surrender went for, which I honestly did not even consider an option until I saw Surrender do it. The classic, the usual.
Oh wow, Combustion being picked there. A little surprising. I was kind of expecting a Pexis, to be honest.
Me too! Ruined Orb and Alexstrasza, and like Surrender's down to 16. Auto step on Jandice is so clutch though. That's the one kind of way to play around this magnificent bait and switch from Surrender, is just having the additional board presence.
Yeah, I think che0nsu will be a little bit surprised to see the Samuro. However, it's far from the end of the world for him. He, of course, gets an immediate Jandice play. He can freeze it so it can't attack for the turn as well. Just wants to set up for that Alex Straza to close out the game.
Oh, he gets Steward as well, so this Ruined Orb and this Brain Freeze have spell damage on them. That's really powerful.
Yeah, that's big. You could even Divine Shield it on this turn. Like, I know that gives up the game as to which one is the illusion minion, but it does protect it pretty well.
Shadow Step again! Are you kidding? Does it even ambush ever? Nah, he has to play the Brain Freeze this turn, right? The Samuro is like too threatening.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's like Shadow Step on the Alex Straza you're probably going for if you haven't won the game next turn.
True. Render's just losing the race.
Yeah, I like this.
And this makes the Troublemaker barely tickle for che0nsu here.
It's the only play because it's by far the biggest, as it's the only buffed minion in hand. Everything else, mana efficiency, way too awkward. And then, what are you even hoping that it hits? Like,
everything loses to Alex Straza, even if it gets rid of the Illusion Barak and value trades over a 2-1. che0nsu is sticking 6 damage on board and has Alex in hand.
Yeah, if it double trades the Steward, you're still dead. Does Sword Eater beat Alex ever? Nah.
And so he just has to hope that the Alex isn't there, that the Troublemaker takes the best possible trades, and that it can somehow set up a counter lethal. However, we can see that che0nsu has set up the check and mate, hitting that next Shadow Step for the Jandice. Despite Surrender's very unconventional but very cool setup into a bigger Samuro sweep, all crushed by Jandice once again. It feels like this entire series has been about the Jandice.
Yeah, it's just been so sick in the Rogue time and again, as che0nsu does get 3 wins in a row on the Rogue. Things were looking rough for him after he lost the Mage Mirror, of course, but from there on in, things just went from bad to worse for a Surrender, and better to better for che0nsu, because he is now going to be going through to the quarter-finals, taking down, again, the who is generally considered the strongest player in Korea. But che0nsu definitely giving Surrender a run for his money these days. A very strong season last year, of course, and following it up with a decent comeback at the very least in this season after what has been a reasonable kind of mediocre start. Definitely starting to get those wins on the board now, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, I mean, of course we keep singing Surrender's praises, but particularly in the Rogue Mirror, che0nsu played out of his mind there, I have to say. Even though what looked like the weird coin Octobot with a hand that kept Jandice felt counterintuitive and the Octobot didn't immediately get value, what it kind of did was